So, Tom, what can a fiduciary do to protect themselves and mitigate their liability exposure? Was there something Ms. Parth could have done differently?
Well, I think in hindsight, there's always like a acting differently in hindsight. But I think the real thing that directors need to do, and this was actually invoked in Parth as well, is that I think you need to check your governing documents if you're going to serve on a board of directors, for example, as to whether or not there are exculpatory clauses in the governing documents. There are a lot of governing documents have provisions that provide the directors and sometimes even the association can't be liable to the homeowners or the association for that matter if they act in good faith with attempt to carry out the obligations of the corporation. And I think that's important for somebody who wants to serve on a volunteer board to know. The other thing that's important is Civil Code Section 5800, which really is like a stop loss statute. It basically says that if a director acts in good faith while serving on a volunteer board of directors, that they won't be liable in excess of the coverage provided by the association, assuming that the homeowners association maintains this coverage specified under the Civil Code section itself. So that when you serve on, there's limits on that, and it's tiered based on how many units you have there, how much coverage you need. And the board member should basically make sure, if they're going to serve on a volunteer board, that their homeowners association has the appropriate insurance coverage so they do have this protection. And another condition of that a lot of people don't really focus on is that if you only get this protection under the Civil Code section if you don't own more than 2 units. So, for example, if you own 5 units in a 500 unit condominium project, if you serve on the board, you're not going to have the protection of this Civil Code section.
But presumably, Ms. Parth's CC&Rs had that exculpatory clause in it, right? So that doesn't prevent you from being sued.
No, none of this prevents you from being sued, even the Civil Code section. Nothing. The only thing that prevents you from being sued is don't serve on the board, I suppose.
That's usually the problem. We need people to volunteer, but this stuff is scary.
That's a podcast for another day.
Yeah, no, and I'm not trying to discourage people from serving on boards because it's an important role. Because in part, I think one of the big things, a lot of homeowner associations do have problems with apathy in the community, and trying to get volunteers to participate is a struggle. So I think it's very important. I do think that, like I said, you can't prevent somebody from suing you, unfortunately. But I think a lot of it is trying to exercise this reasonable diligence to mitigate or reduce the likelihood of a claim. And if there is a claim, providing people that are defending you with the opportunity to invoke the business judgment rule and the exculpatory clause, and in the worst case scenario, Civil Code Section 5800.